3. The chaos-order dialectic. The chaos-order dialectic stands against the background of continuity, so that ultimately the vision is one of unity. Chaos and order represent not an ultimate dualism, but aspects of being and stages of growth. In a sense, chaos, as the womb of being, is the female principle, and order is the male principle. These concepts seem to have governed the Greek sexual outlook. Woman was the ground and the nurse, but not the parent of the seed. Apollo, in the Eumenides of Aeschylus, declared, "I will tell you, and I will answer it correctly. Watch. The mother is no parent of that which is called her child, but only nurse of the new-planted seed that grows. The parent is he who mounts. A stranger, she preserves a stranger's seed, if no god interfere. I will show you the proof of what I have explained. There can be a father without any mother. There she stands, the living witness, daughter of Olympian Zeus, she who was never fostered in the dark of the womb, yet such a child as no goddess could bring to birth." For a similar concept of woman, see the laws of Lycurgus. Lycurgus allowed a man who was advanced in years and had a young wife to recommend some virtuous and approved young man that she might have a child by him, who might inherit the good qualities of the father and be a son to himself. On the other side, an honest man who had love for a married woman upon account of her modesty and the well-favouredness of her children might, without formality, beg her company of her husband that he might raise, as it were, from this plot of good ground, worthy and well-allied children for himself. And indeed Lycurgus was of a persuasion that children were not so much the property of their parents as of the whole commonwealth, and therefore would not have his citizens begot by first-comers, but by the best men that could be found. The laws of other nations seemed to him very absurd and inconsistent. Where people would be so solicitous for their dogs and horses as to exert interest and to pay money to procure fine breeding, and yet kept their wives shut up, to be made mothers only by themselves, who might be foolish, infirm, or diseased, as if it were not apparent that children of a bad breed would prove their bad qualities first upon those who kept and were rearing them, and well-born children, in like manner, their good qualities. These regulations, founded on natural and social grounds, were certainly far from that scandalous liberty which was afterwards charged upon their women, that they knew not what adultery meant. Original creation was from chaos, even as man's first birth is from woman, an inescapable fact. On coming to manhood, however, the male child must purge himself through rites of initiation and purgation from femaleness and chaos. Attention was called to this by Jane Harrison. In the case of Kouros, the child is taken from its mother. In the case of the Dithram, it is actually reborn from the thigh of its father. In both cases, the intent is the same, but in the case of the Dithram, it is far more emphatically expressed. The birth from the male womb is to rid the child from the infection of his mother, to turn him from a woman thing into a man thing. Homosexuality had an important part in this rebirth and in the education of the reborn. Xenophon declared, "I must now speak of pederasty, for it affects education." And Plato, in the Symposium, set this perversion in a pedagogical and mystical context. He saw homosexuality, philosophy, and gymnastics as inimical to tyranny. According to Marou, Greek love was to provide classical education with its material conditions and its methods. For the men of ancient times, this type of love was essentially educative. Its aim is to educate, as Plato says. It was an anti-feminine idea of complete manliness. It established a closer relationship, according to Plato, than between parents and children, an indication, perhaps, of initiation into a cult. Women were similarly educated into perversions by women, with Sappho an instance of the teaching woman. The triumph of order was the goal, and order could beget order, but in the fullest society, chaos was a necessary part of all things and continuous with order. Hence, the truest symbol of perfection was not Zeus as a male god, nor kings. Zeuses, the ancients used to call their kings, but rather the hermaphrodite. Indeed, hermaphroditism was attributed to a number of divine beings as one of their several perfections. It was bound up with human aspirations to perpetual life. As a result, Zeus himself was portrayed as a hermaphrodite. Chaos, according to Rufinus, caused to emanate from himself a double form, androgynous, made by the conjunction of opposites. To simulate the perfection of androgynous beings, women in ancient mysteries assumed male dress or wore a beard, and men castrated themselves in terms of this same perfection. The bisexuality of the philosophers amounts to asexuality. Spiritual man is completely freed from the bonds of the flesh. The hermaphrodite ideal of perfection entered deeply into Gnostic thought and into the Talmud, which drew the doctrine of primitive humanity as bisexual, which passed into Jewish mysticism, as well as into Arab esotericism, in which the unity Adam-Eve represents universal man. There are connections between the concept of androgyny as perfection and the religious myth of performance of incest.